What you are about to hear is a story that pushes the boundaries of human depravity. A tale so chilling it will linger in your thoughts long after you've finished. It's a stark reminder that the most monstrous acts can be committed by those we least expect, those who share our homes and our lives. Before we delve into this harrowing account, be sure to subscribe to our channel and click the notification bell, so you don't miss out on our explorations into the darkest corners of the human psyche. Now, prepare yourselves for a story that is as tragic as it is terrifying. The late afternoon sun, a buttery yellow, streamed through the ornate windows of the Caldwell mansion, casting long, dancing shadows across the marble floors. From the outside, the estate was a picture of idyllic wealth and familial harmony. Rolling green lawns, meticulously manicured gardens, and a facade that spoke of old money and deep-rooted prestige. But within those opulent walls, a different story was unfolding, one of simmering resentment, veiled threats, and a darkness that was slowly, inexorably, tightening its grip. Eleanor Caldwell, the matriarch of the family, was a woman carved from ice and ambition. Her silver hair was always coiffed to perfection, her designer gowns whispering elegance with every rustle. She moved through her home with the regal air of a queen surveying her domain, her sharp, intelligent eyes missing nothing. Her son, Julian, was her world, the vessel for all her hopes and dreams. He was handsome, charming, and successful, a testament to her meticulous upbringing. When Julian brought home Amelia, a vibrant, kind-hearted artist with a laugh that could fill a room and a spirit that refused to be tamed, Eleanor saw not a daughter-in-law, but an intruder. Amelia, with her paint-splattered jeans and her fierce independence, was everything Eleanor was not. She was a wildflower in a meticulously arranged bouquet, a splash of chaotic color in a world of muted, controlled tones. From the very beginning, Eleanor's welcome was as cold as the marble in her foyer. Her smiles were thin, her compliments double-edged swords. "You have a unique sense of style, my dear," she would say, her eyes raking over Amelia's bohemian attire with thinly veiled disdain. "So artistic." The word was pronounced as if it were a synonym for unsuitable. Julian, caught in the crossfire, was a man torn. He loved Amelia with a fierce, protective passion. He saw the world through her eyes, a world of vibrant color and boundless possibility. But he was also a son, conditioned from birth to seek his mother's approval, to bend to her iron will. He would try to mediate, to build bridges between the two most important women in his life, but his efforts were like trying to build a sandcastle against a relentless tide. "Mother, please just give her a chance," he would plead in private. "She's wonderful. You just need to get to know her." Eleanor would simply pat his hand, her touch as cold as her smile. "Of course, darling. I'm only thinking of you. A man in your position needs a certain caliber of wife, someone who understands the intricacies of our world." The unspoken implication was clear. Amelia was not that woman. The first few months of the marriage were a tightrope walk for Amelia. She tried her best to fit in, to learn the unwritten rules of the Caldwell dynasty. She traded her comfortable jeans for restrictive dresses, her messy bun for a more appropriate updo. She learned to navigate the labyrinthine social circles Eleanor commanded, to smile politely at condescending remarks and to hold her tongue when every fiber of her being screamed in protest. But it was like trying to force a square peg into a round hole. The more she tried to conform, the more she felt herself disappearing, her vibrant spirit dimming under the constant scrutiny and disapproval. Her art was her only sanctuary. In the small studio Julian had set up for her in a sun-drenched corner of the mansion, she could be herself. She could lose herself in the riot of colors, in the expressive strokes of her brush. Her paintings were a reflection of her inner turmoil, a whirlwind of vibrant hues clashing with dark, brooding shadows. They were raw, emotional, and utterly beautiful. But even this sacred space was not immune to Eleanor's insidious influence. One afternoon, Eleanor entered the studio without knocking, a rare breach of etiquette that was clearly intentional. She surveyed the canvases with a critical eye, her lips pursed in a thin line of distaste. "Such passionate work," she commented, her voice dripping with sarcasm. So much emotion. One might almost say it's a bit overwrought. She picked up a half-finished painting, a portrait of Julian, his face a mixture of love and conflict. You've made him look so troubled, my dear. My Julian is a happy man, a successful man, not this tortured soul. Amelia's hands clenched at her sides. It's my interpretation, Eleanor. Art is subjective. Of course, Eleanor replied, her voice smooth as silk. But one must be careful not to project one's own anxieties onto others. She placed the painting back on the easel with a delicate, almost dismissive touch. Julian has a certain image to maintain. We all do. The conversation was a turning point. Amelia realized that Eleanor was not just a difficult mother-in-law. She was a saboteur, actively working to undermine her, to poison her marriage, to erase her from the family portrait. The passive aggression began to escalate, the subtle barbs replaced with more overt acts of cruelty. Eleanor would accidentally spill wine on Amelia's dress at a dinner party, her apology a masterpiece of insincerity. She would forget to include Amelia in family outings, leaving her to wander the cavernous mansion alone. She would tell Julian little lies, twisting Amelia's words, painting her as unstable, as emotionally fragile. Amelia tried to talk to Julian about it, but he was caught in his mother's web. You're being too sensitive, darling, he would say, his voice laced with a weary frustration. Mother is old-fashioned. She means well. But even as he said the words, a flicker of doubt would cross his face. He saw the change in Amelia, the dimming of her light, the shadows that now haunted her once bright eyes. The isolation was a slow poison. Amelia's friends, intimidated by the Caldwell's wealth and Eleanor's icy demeanor, began to drift away. Her own family, a warm and loving clan from a different, more down-to-earth world, lived hundreds of miles away. Their phone calls, once a source of comfort, now felt like a painful reminder of the life she had left behind. You sound tired, sweetheart, her mother would say, her voice full of concern. Is everything all right? And Amelia would lie, forcing a cheerful tone, not wanting to worry them, not wanting to admit that her fairy tale marriage was, in reality, a gilded cage. The mansion, once a symbol of a new and exciting life, began to feel like a prison. The long, silent hallways seemed to mock her with their emptiness. The antique furniture, polished to a mirror shine, felt cold and unwelcoming. The ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall was a constant, oppressive reminder of the slow, relentless passage of time, each tick a step closer to. She didn't know what, but a sense of dread had taken root in her heart, a gnawing fear that was as real and as palpable as the cold marble beneath her feet. One evening, Amelia overheard a conversation between Eleanor and Julian. She had been on her way to the library when their raised voices drifted from behind the heavy oak doors. She stopped, her heart pounding in her chest, and pressed her ear to the cold wood. Can't go on like this, Mother, Julian was saying, his voice strained. You're making her miserable. You're making me miserable. I am trying to protect you, Julian. Eleanor's voice was a low, venomous hiss. She is not one of us. She is a weed in our garden. And if you are not careful, she will choke the life out of everything we have built. That's not true. She's my wife. I love her. Love, Eleanor scoffed, the word a poison dart. You are infatuated with a fantasy, pretty face and a rebellious spirit. But that is not what this family needs. This family needs strength. It needs purity. Amelia's blood ran cold. The word purity hung in the air, thick and menacing. She backed away from the door, her hands trembling. She fled to her studio, the one place she felt safe, and locked the door behind her. She stood in the center of the room, surrounded by her unfinished paintings, her silent, colorful confidants. The world outside the studio was a black and white photograph, cold and lifeless. But in her world, there was still color, still life, still hope. She picked up a brush, her hand shaking so badly she could barely hold it. She began to paint, not a specific image, but a chaotic swirl of colors, a maelstrom of fear and anger and despair. The next morning, at breakfast, the tension was a physical presence, a thick, suffocating blanket. Julian was silent, his face pale and drawn. Eleanor was a picture of serene composure, but her eyes, when they met Amelia's, were chips of ice. "I have a surprise for you, my dear," Eleanor said, her voice a syrupy sweet that sent a shiver down Amelia's spine. She placed a small, beautifully wrapped box on the table in front of Amelia. Amelia looked at Julian, a silent plea in her eyes. He gave a small, almost imperceptible shake of his head. "Go on, open it," Eleanor urged, her smile widening. With trembling fingers, Amelia untied the silk ribbon and lifted the lid of the box. Nestled on a bed of black velvet was a single, perfect, blood-red rose, and a small, handwritten card. "A new beginning," it read. Amelia looked up at Eleanor, her heart a leaden weight in her chest. The rose was not a peace offering. It was a declaration of war. The new beginning Eleanor envisioned was one without her. The days that followed were a blur of heightened anxiety and a creeping, insidious fear. Eleanor's torment became more overt, more audacious. She would move Amelia's things, then feign ignorance when Amelia couldn't find them. She would cancel Amelia's appointments without telling her. She would invite Julian's ex-girlfriend, a woman from a suitable family, over for tea, her laughter echoing through the house like a cruel taunt. Amelia felt like she was losing her mind. She started a journal, a secret diary hidden beneath a loose floorboard in her studio. She poured her fears, her frustrations, her growing sense of dread onto the pages. "I feel like a ghost in this house," she wrote. "I am invisible, unheard. Eleanor is trying to erase me, and I think Julian is letting her." The final straw came a week later. Amelia had been working on a commission, a large, vibrant abstract painting for a local gallery. It was her chance to reclaim a piece of her old life, to prove to herself that she was still an artist, still a person of value outside the gilded cage of the Caldwell mansion. She had been pouring her heart and soul into the piece, and it was almost finished. She came back to her studio after a short walk in the garden, a rare moment of peace in her turbulent world. The door was ajar. A cold knot of dread tightened in her stomach. She pushed the door open and a strangled cry escaped her lips. The studio was in ruins. Her canvases were slashed, her paints smeared across the walls, her brushes snapped in two. And in the center of the room, her commissioned painting, her masterpiece, was a shredded, unrecognizable mess. And standing in the midst of the chaos, a small, cruel smile playing on her lips, was Eleanor. She held a pair of garden shears in her hand, the blades dripping with a rainbow of colors, a macabre paintbrush of destruction. "I thought your work could use a little deconstruction," Eleanor said, her voice as calm and as cold as a winter morning. "It was all so cluttered, so emotional. I've tidied up for you." Amelia stared at her, the shock so profound it was a physical blow. The air was knocked from her lungs. The room began to spin. And then, the shock gave way to a white-hot rage, a fury so intense it burned away the fear and the despair and the suffocating sense of helplessness. "You," Amelia whispered, her voice a low, dangerous growl. "You did this." "Of course I did," Eleanor said, her smile widening. "It was for the best, for Julian, for the family." "You will not get away with this," Amelia said, her voice gaining strength, her eyes blazing with a newfound fire. "I will tell Julian. I will tell everyone. They will see you for the monster you are." Eleanor laughed, a high, tinkling sound that was utterly devoid of humor. "My dear, sweet, naive little girl, who do you think they will believe? The devoted mother, the respected matriarch of this community? Or the hysterical, unstable little artist who is so clearly unraveling?" And in that moment, Amelia understood. She was trapped. Eleanor had woven a web of lies and manipulation so intricate, so convincing, that any attempt to expose her would be seen as a sign of madness. She was a fly caught in a spider's web, and the spider was about to strike. The gilded cage had become a tomb, and the warden was a woman with a heart as cold and as hard as the diamonds that adorned her neck. The darkness that had been simmering beneath the surface had finally boiled over, and Amelia was about to be consumed by it. She had to escape, but she knew, with a chilling certainty, that Eleanor Caldwell would never let her go. Not alive. The destruction of her studio was not just an act of vandalism. It was a desecration. It was the moment the veil was torn, the polite facade of civility irrevocably shattered. Amelia looked at the ruin of her art, the vibrant colors now a chaotic, muddy smear across the walls and floor, and saw a chilling metaphor for her own life. Eleanor had not just destroyed her paintings. She had tried to destroy her soul. But in the ashes of her art, a different kind of fire was kindled within Amelia, the fire of survival. The initial shock gave way to a cold, clear-eyed resolve. The fear was still there, a constant, gnawing presence in the pit of her stomach, but it was now overshadowed by a burning, righteous anger. She would not be erased. She would not be driven mad. She would fight back. Her first move was to confront Julian. She didn't clean up the studio. She left it as it was, a brutal, undeniable testament to his mother's cruelty. She waited for him to come home, her heart a frantic drum against her ribs. When he walked through the door, his face etched with the weariness of a long day at the office, she took his hand and led him to the studio without a word. The color drained from his face as he took in the scene. "My God," he whispered, his eyes wide with disbelief. "What happened?" "Your mother happened," Amelia said, her voice shaking with suppressed rage. "She did this. With these." She pointed to the garden shears, still lying on the floor, their blades caked with a macabre rainbow of dried paint. Julian stared at the shears, then back at the devastated room. A muscle twitched in his jaw. "No," he said, shaking his head. "She wouldn't. She couldn't." "Open your eyes, Julian." Amelia's voice rose, raw with desperation. "She hates me. She has been trying to get rid of me from the day I met her. This is not just about paint and canvas. This is a message. She is trying to break me." Julian ran a hand through his hair, his face a mask of conflict. "There has to be another explanation. Maybe it was a break-in. Someone from the outside." "A break-in?" "Julian, be serious. Nothing was stolen. Only my work was destroyed. Only my spirit was targeted. It was her. I saw her. She stood right there, smiling, and told me she was tidying up." The rawness of her pain, the undeniable truth in her eyes, seemed to finally break through his wall of denial. He looked from her tear-streaked face to the wreckage of her art, and something in him seemed to crumble. I'll talk to her," he stammered, his voice barely a whisper. But Amelia knew it was a hollow promise. He would talk to her, and Eleanor, the master manipulator, would twist the story, would paint Amelia as the hysterical, unhinged one. She would deny everything, and Julian, desperate to believe in the illusion of a happy family, would cling to her lies like a drowning man to a life raft. And she was right. Later that night, the hushed, angry tones of their argument drifted up from the library. Amelia couldn't make out the words, but the cadence was familiar. Julian's desperate pleading, Eleanor's calm, cutting responses. After an hour, Julian emerged, his face pale and defeated. "She denies it," he said, his voice flat. "She said she came in and found it like this. She thinks you did it yourself." A cry for help. The accusation was a physical blow. Amelia felt the air rush from her lungs. "And you? What do you believe, Julian?" He couldn't meet her eyes. I don't know what to believe anymore." That was the moment Amelia knew she was truly alone. Her husband, the man who had promised to love and protect her, had chosen his mother's lies over her truth. The gilded cage had slammed shut, and the key was in Eleanor's hand. From that day forward, the psychological warfare intensified. Eleanor, emboldened by her victory, became more audacious in her cruelty. She was no longer content with subtle barbs and passive aggression. She began a systematic campaign to isolate Amelia completely, to sever her from any and all support systems. She started with the staff. The cook, a kind woman who had always had a warm smile for Amelia, suddenly became cold and distant. The housekeeper, who had once complimented Amelia's paintings, now averted her eyes whenever they passed in the hall. Amelia realized, with a dawning horror, that Eleanor was spreading rumors, painting her as unstable, even dangerous. She was a prisoner in her own home, surrounded by people who had been turned against her. Then, Eleanor went after Amelia's connection to the outside world. Her phone calls to her family became stilted and strange. There would be static on the line, or the call would inexplicably drop. One day, her mother said, "Amelia, darling, a woman called me yesterday. She said she was from your doctor's office. She said you've been unwell, that you've been having episodes. Is everything all right, sweetheart?" Amelia's blood ran cold. Eleanor had crossed a line she never thought possible. She was not just trying to drive a wedge between her and Julian. She was trying to turn her own family against her, to make them doubt her sanity. "That's not true, Mom," Amelia said, her voice trembling. "I'm fine. Everything is fine." But the lie tasted like ash in her mouth. The paranoia began to set in, a creeping, insidious vine that wrapped itself around her thoughts. She started to question everything. Was the food she was eating safe? Was Eleanor putting something in her tea to make her feel groggy and confused? She began to lock her bedroom door at night, piling furniture against it, a barricade against the unseen enemy that roamed the halls of the mansion. She stopped eating the food prepared by the cook, surviving on prepackaged snacks she bought on her rare trips out of the house. She documented everything in her secret journal, her handwriting becoming more and more frantic, the words tumbling over each other in a desperate torrent. She took pictures of the destroyed studio, of the single ominous red rose Eleanor had given her. She knew she needed evidence, proof that she wasn't crazy, that this was really happening. Her only respite was her secret trips to a small, anonymous coffee shop in a neighboring town. There, she would use the public Wi-Fi to research. She looked up gaslighting, psychological abuse, narcissistic personality disorder. The descriptions she read were a chillingly accurate portrait of Eleanor Caldwell. The constant denial, the manipulation of reality, the systematic erosion of her victim's confidence, it was all there, a textbook case. The validation was a small comfort, a confirmation that she wasn't imagining things. But it was also terrifying. She was dealing with a monster, a highly intelligent, cunning predator who wore the guise of a sophisticated, respectable woman. One afternoon, while Julian was at work and Eleanor was at one of her charity luncheons, Amelia decided to search Eleanor's room. It was a risky move, but she was desperate. She needed something, anything, to use against her. Her hands shaking, she slipped into the master suite, a space that was as cold and as immaculately arranged as its owner. The air was thick with the scent of expensive perfume and something else, something cloying and unpleasant that she couldn't quite identify. She moved quickly, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs. She checked the desk drawers, the nightstands, the walk-in closet. Nothing, just perfectly folded clothes, meticulously organized jewelry, and the mundane paperwork of a wealthy woman's life. She was about to give up when she noticed a small, antique chest tucked away in the corner of the closet. It was locked. Driven by a surge of adrenaline, she found a letter opener on the desk and worked it into the lock. It took a few nerve-wracking minutes, but finally, with a soft click, the lock gave way. She lifted the lid, her breath catching in her throat. Inside was not what she expected. There were no incriminating documents, no hidden poisons. Instead, there was a collection of old, yellowed photographs and a bundle of letters tied with a faded silk ribbon. The photographs were of a young Eleanor and a man Amelia didn't recognize. In the pictures, Eleanor was smiling, a genuine, unguarded smile that Amelia had never seen before. She looked happy. Her curiosity piqued. Amelia untied the ribbon and began to read the letters. They were from the man in the photographs. They were love letters, passionate, poetic, full of dreams of a future together. But as she read on, the tone of the letters began to change. They became more desperate, more pleading. The man was from a lower social class, a commoner in the eyes of Eleanor's powerful family. They had forbidden the match. The final letter was a heartbreaking farewell, a man giving up on the love of his life because he knew he could never be a part of her world. And then, at the bottom of the chest, Amelia found a small, leather-bound diary. It was Eleanor's. Her handwriting was a youthful, looping script, a stark contrast to the sharp, angular writing of the woman she had become. The diary entries chronicled her forbidden love affair, her stolen moments of happiness, her growing despair as her family tightened the noose around her. And then, the final entry, dated a week after the last letter from her lover. "He is gone," it read. "They sent him away. They told me I would forget him, that I would learn to love the man they have chosen for me. A man of wealth and status. A man who will give me everything I am supposed to want. But they have taken the only thing I ever truly did want. They have ripped out my heart and left a cold, empty space in its place. I will be the perfect wife. I will be the perfect mother. I will build an empire of ice around myself, so that no one can ever hurt me again. And I will never, ever let anyone threaten the world I have built. Especially not for something as foolish and as dangerous as love." Amelia closed the diary, her hands trembling. This was not an excuse for Eleanor's cruelty, but it was an explanation. It was a glimpse into the heart of the monster, a heart that had been broken so long ago that it had frozen over, turning to a shard of ice. Eleanor saw in Amelia everything she had been forced to give up: a passionate love, a free spirit, a life chosen for herself. And she hated her for it. She was replaying her own tragedy, but this time, she was the one in control, the one pulling the strings, the one destroying the love that she believed had destroyed her. A floorboard creaked in the hallway. Amelia's head snapped up. She quickly put everything back in the chest, locked it, and slipped out of the room, her heart pounding in her ears. Had she been seen? The next few days were a tense, nerve-wracking waiting game. Eleanor was even colder than usual, her eyes following Amelia's every move with an unnerving intensity. Amelia felt like a mouse being watched by a hawk. She knew that Eleanor knew she had been in her room. The question was, what would she do about it? The answer came in a way that was more terrifying than anything Amelia could have imagined. One evening, Julian announced that he had to go on an unexpected business trip. He would be gone for a week. "I'm sorry to leave you, darling," he said, kissing her forehead. "But it's a big deal. I have to go." Amelia begged him not to. "Please, Julian," she whispered, her voice tight with panic. "Don't leave me here alone with her." He sighed, a look of weary frustration on his face. "Amelia, we've been over this. She's my mother. She's not going to hurt you. You have to stop this." But Amelia knew he was wrong. The moment the door closed behind Julian, a palpable shift occurred in the atmosphere of the house. The air grew heavy, charged with a menacing energy. Eleanor's polite mask dropped completely. Her smiles were gone, replaced by a look of cold, predatory triumph. That night, Amelia barricaded her door as usual. But in the middle of the night, she was woken by a sound. A soft, rhythmic scraping. It was coming from her door. Someone was trying to pick the lock. She lay in bed, frozen with terror, her heart a wild bird trapped in her chest. The scraping stopped. There was a soft click. The doorknob began to turn. Amelia screamed. She scrambled out of bed, grabbing the heaviest thing she could find, a large, ornate lamp. The door swung open, and Eleanor stood in the doorway, a silhouetted figure against the dim light of the hallway. She held a small, wicked-looking knife in her hand. "You should not have gone into my room," she said, her voice a low, chilling whisper. "You should not have read my things. You have been a thorn in my side for too long, little girl. It's time to do some pruning." Adrenaline surged through Amelia's veins. She flung the lamp at Eleanor, who sidestepped it with surprising agility. The lamp crashed against the wall, and in that moment of distraction, Amelia bolted. She ran past Eleanor, out of the room, down the long, dark hallway, her bare feet slapping against the cold marble floor. She didn't know where she was going. She just knew she had to get out. She could hear Eleanor's footsteps behind her, a calm, unhurried pace that was somehow more terrifying than a frantic pursuit. It was the sound of a predator who knows its prey is trapped. Amelia scrambled down the grand staircase, her breath coming in ragged sobs. She fumbled with the heavy lock on the front door, her fingers slick with sweat. It wouldn't budge. She was trapped. She turned, her back pressed against the cold, unyielding wood of the door. Eleanor stood at the top of the stairs, the knife glinting in the moonlight that streamed through the high windows. She began to descend, her movements slow, deliberate, a queen descending to pass judgment. "There is nowhere to run, my dear," she said, her voice a soft, venomous caress. "This is my house. You are in my world now, and in my world I make the rules, and I have decided that you are no longer welcome." The gilded cage had become a death trap. The unraveling was complete, and as Amelia stared up at the woman who was both her mother-in-law and her would-be executioner, she knew that her fairy tale had come to a brutal, horrifying end. The only question now was whether she would make it out alive. The primal, instinctual will to survive surged through Amelia, a roaring fire that burned away the last vestiges of fear. As Eleanor descended the grand staircase, a specter of aristocratic rage, her face a mask of cold fury, Amelia's mind raced, scanning the cavernous foyer for a weapon, an escape route, anything. Her eyes darted from the heavy, ornate umbrella stand to a marble bust of some long-dead Caldwell ancestor. There was no time. Eleanor reached the bottom of the stairs, the knife held low, its polished blade catching the slivers of moonlight, a sliver of death in the oppressive darkness. "It's a shame." "Really?" Eleanor said, her voice conversational, as if they were discussing the weather. "You have your mother's eyes. I remember her from the wedding. A simple woman but kind. She will be so devastated to learn of your tragic accident." The mention of her mother ignited a fresh wave of fury in Amelia. "You will not touch my family," she snarled, her voice a low growl that surprised even herself. "Oh, but I'm not going to touch them," Eleanor purred, taking another slow, deliberate step forward. "I'm going to give them a piece of you, a little keepsake, something to remember you by." That was it. The grotesque, unimaginable horror of her words snapped the last thread of Amelia's restraint. As Eleanor lunged, Amelia reacted on pure instinct. She sidestepped, grabbing the heavy, silk tassel from the curtain tie-back. It wasn't much of a weapon, but it was something. Eleanor, surprised by her sudden agility, stumbled, her lunge missing its mark. Amelia didn't hesitate. She swung the heavy tassel with all her might, catching Eleanor on the side of the head. The older woman cried out, more in surprise than pain, and staggered back. The knife clattered to the marble floor. Amelia scrambled for it, her fingers closing around the cold, smooth hilt just as Eleanor recovered. But the dynamic had shifted. Now Amelia held the weapon. She backed away, holding the knife in front of her, her hand shaking violently. "Stay away from me," she panted, her voice ragged. Eleanor's eyes, cold and calculating, fixed on the knife. A slow, cruel smile spread across her face. "You don't have it in you," she taunted. "You're a painter, a creator, not a destroyer. Not like me." She was right. The thought of plunging the knife into another human being, even this monster, was abhorrent. But Eleanor didn't know the full story. She didn't know about the secret journal, the photographs, the escape plan Amelia had been formulating in the dark, desperate corners of her mind for weeks. She had a bag packed, hidden in the back of her closet, with cash, her passport, and her journal, her evidence. If she could just get to it, if she could just get out of this house, she could expose Eleanor for what she was. "I don't have to be like you," Amelia said, her voice gaining a semblance of steadiness. "I just have to get past you." She feinted to the left, and as Eleanor moved to block her, she darted to the right, sprinting back up the staircase. She could hear Eleanor behind her, her earlier, calm composure replaced by a guttural roar of fury. This was no longer a game of psychological chess. It had devolved into a brutal, primal struggle for dominance. Amelia reached her bedroom, slammed the door, and fumbled with the lock. She knew it wouldn't hold for long. She grabbed the chair she had used as a barricade and wedged it under the doorknob. Then, she ran to the closet, pulled out her hidden go-bag, and slung it over her shoulder. She had one last thing to do. She raced to her studio, which was connected to her bedroom through a small dressing room. The room was still a scene of devastation, a painful reminder of the beginning of the end. She grabbed her phone from the charging station, her fingers flying across the screen. She opened the cloud storage app where she had been secretly uploading photos of her journal pages, of Eleanor's diary, of the destroyed studio. She hit share and sent the link to her sister, to her mother, and to a lawyer she had secretly contacted weeks ago, with the subject line, "If you are reading this, I'm in danger." The bedroom door splintered, the sound of cracking would echoing through the suite. There was no time left. Her bedroom was on the second floor, the drop to the manicured lawns below too high. But her studio had a small balcony, a Juliet balcony that overlooked the sprawling, dark gardens. It was her only chance. She scrambled onto the balcony, the cold night air a shock to her system. Below her, the thick, gnarled branches of an ancient wisteria vine clung to the stone wall of the mansion. It was a risky, desperate gamble, but it was better than the certainty of what awaited her inside the room. The bedroom door burst open. Eleanor stood there, her hair disheveled, her eyes blazing with a maniacal light. She saw Amelia on the balcony, and a look of pure, unadulterated hatred twisted her features. "You are not leaving this house," she shrieked. Amelia didn't wait to hear more. She swung her legs over the railing, her go-bag bumping against her back. She took a deep breath and reached for the wisteria vine. Her fingers closed around a thick, woody branch. For a terrifying moment, her feet dangled in the air, her entire weight supported by her grip. Then her other hand found a hold, and she began to climb down, her bare feet scraping against the rough stone, her heart hammering against her ribs. She didn't look back. She could hear Eleanor's screams of rage from the balcony, a soundtrack to her desperate escape. She reached the bottom, her body trembling with adrenaline and exhaustion. She landed in a soft flower bed, the scent of damp earth and crushed petals filling her nostrils. She was out. She ran. She ran across the perfectly manicured lawns, through the dark, menacing shapes of the formal gardens, towards the high stone wall that enclosed the estate. She found the service gate, the one the gardeners used. She fumbled with the latch, her hands clumsy with panic. It opened. She slipped through and didn't stop running until the streetlights of the main road were a welcome, hopeful glow in the distance. She flagged down the first car that passed, a beat-up truck driven by a startled-looking farmer. He saw her tear-streaked face, her bare feet, the wild terror in her eyes, and without a word, he let her in. "Police!" she gasped. "Take me to the police." The hours that followed were a blur. She told her story to a skeptical-looking detective, her voice hoarse, her words tumbling out in a chaotic, disjointed narrative. The attack, the knife, the destroyed studio, the psychological abuse. It sounded insane, the plot of a gothic horror novel. She saw the doubt in his eyes. The Caldwells were a powerful, respected family. Eleanor was a philanthropist, a pillar of the community. Amelia was an outsider, an emotional artist with a wild story. "Do you have any proof of these accusations?" the detective asked, his tone flat, professional. "Yes," Amelia said, her voice shaking. "I do." She told him about the journal, the photos, the link she had sent to her family and her lawyer. She gave him the lawyer's number. While one officer took her to the hospital to have her cuts and bruises documented, the detective made the call. Amelia waited, a blanket wrapped around her shoulders, the sterile, impersonal atmosphere of the hospital waiting room, a stark contrast to the opulent prison she had just escaped. A few hours later, the detective returned. His demeanor had changed. The skepticism was gone. replaced by a grim, serious expression. "Your sister got the link," he said. "She sent us everything. Photos of your journal, of another diary. We're getting a warrant to search the house." Relief washed over Amelia, so potent it almost brought her to her knees. She wasn't crazy. It was real. And now someone believed her. The police arrived at the Caldwell mansion just before dawn. They found Eleanor sitting in the grand foyer, sipping tea, as calm and as composed as if she were waiting for a guest. The house was immaculate. The knife was gone. The broken lamp had been cleared away. The splintered door to Amelia's bedroom had been tidied, the jagged edges smoothed. It was as if nothing had happened. Eleanor denied everything. She painted a picture of a troubled, delusional daughter-in-law who had suffered a psychotic break, destroyed her own studio, and fled in a fit of paranoia. It was a convincing performance, but she hadn't counted on the digital breadcrumb trail Amelia had left behind. The photos were undeniable. The journal entries, both Amelia's and Eleanor's, told a story that was too detailed, too consistent, to be a fabrication. When the police found the antique chest in Eleanor's closet, and the diary that matched the photos Amelia had sent, the web of lies began to unravel. And when they found the bloody garden shears, hastily cleaned but not perfectly, hidden at the bottom of a compost bin in the garden, the case against Eleanor Caldwell was sealed. Julian returned from his business trip, a trip, it turned out, that Eleanor had orchestrated to get him out of the house to find his home a crime scene and his mother under arrest. His world shattered. The perfect, powerful matriarch he had worshipped his entire life was a monster. The wife he had doubted, the woman he had allowed his mother to torment, had been telling the truth all along. His denial had almost cost Amelia her life. The weight of his guilt was a crushing, unbearable burden. The trial was a media sensation. The story of the wealthy, sophisticated mother-in-law who turned into a would-be killer was the stuff of headlines. Eleanor, ever the performer, maintained her innocence to the end, her face an unreadable mask of cold dignity. But the evidence was overwhelming. She was found guilty of attempted murder, aggravated assault, and a dozen other charges. The judge, calling her actions the epitome of calculated cruelty, sentenced her to life in prison. Amelia, with the support of her loving family, began the slow, painful process of healing. She moved back to her hometown, to the warmth and familiarity of the world she had left behind. She continued to paint, her art now imbued with a new depth, a new power. The dark, brooding shadows were still there, but now they were pierced by brilliant, defiant streaks of light. Her work was a testament to her resilience, to the strength of a spirit that had refused to be broken. But the story does not end there, because Eleanor Caldwell, even behind bars, was not a woman to accept defeat. From her prison cell, she began to plot, her mind as sharp and as venomous as ever. She still had money, she still had connections, and she had a burning, all-consuming hatred for the woman who had taken everything from her. A few months after the sentencing, Amelia's mother received a package in the mail. It was a small, beautifully wrapped box with no return address. Inside, nestled on a bed of black velvet, was a single, perfect, blood-red rose, and a small, handwritten card. "You took my son," it read. "Now I will take your daughter." Piece by piece. The threat was clear. The nightmare was not over. It had just entered a new, more terrifying chapter. Eleanor could no longer torment Amelia directly, but she could still reach her. She could still instill fear. And she had found a new, more horrifying way to do it. A week later, a second package arrived. This one was sent to Amelia's sister. It was larger, heavier. The postmark was from a town near the prison where Eleanor was incarcerated. Inside, wrapped in layers of plastic and packed in ice, was a gruesome, unimaginable horror. A lock of Amelia's hair, matted with blood. And another note. The first piece. It read, "Many more to come." Panic and terror gripped Amelia's family. The police were called, but the package was untraceable, sent from a public mailbox, the note written in disguised handwriting. They placed Amelia under protective custody, But she knew, with a chilling certainty, that Eleanor's reach was long. She had found a way to continue her reign of terror from behind bars. The red packages, as the media dubbed them, became a horrifying, serialized nightmare. Every week, a new package would arrive, sent to a different member of Amelia's family. Each contained a small, gruesome keepsake, a symbolic piece of the daughter they loved. A torn piece of fabric from the dress Amelia wore on her wedding day, stained with a red substance that looked terrifyingly like blood. A single earring, identical to the ones Amelia wore when she escaped the mansion. A photograph of Amelia, her face scratched out with a sharp object. The psychological toll was immense. Amelia, though physically safe, was a prisoner of fear. She was haunted by the knowledge that her family was being tormented because of her. The packages were a constant, brutal reminder that Eleanor's hatred was a living, breathing thing, a monster that could not be contained by prison walls. The final package was the most horrific of all. It was sent directly to the lead detective on the case, a brazen, audacious act of defiance. Inside was a small, intricately carved wooden box, and inside the box a single, polished human tooth. The note was simple: "You can't protect her forever." Forensic analysis confirmed the unthinkable. The tooth was a molar, and the DNA matched a sample taken from Eleanor's ex-lover, the man from the letters, who had mysteriously disappeared over 40 years ago. The police reopened the cold case, and with this new evidence, they uncovered a dark, long-buried secret. Eleanor Caldwell had not just driven her first love away. She had made him disappear. Permanently. The cold, empty space in her heart had been created by her own hand. She was not a woman broken by lost love. She was a predator who had killed before. And now her sights were set on Amelia. The red packages were not just a campaign of psychological terror. They were a promise. A down payment on a debt of hatred that Eleanor Caldwell intended to collect, one gruesome piece at a time. The gilded cage had been destroyed, but the monster had been unleashed. And she would not rest until she had delivered the final, blood-soaked package herself. The story of the killer mother-in-law was far from over. It had simply found a new, and much more terrifying, beginning.